Hello, glad you can join us. Here's what's happening. Western powers converge in Alberta to talk conflict and commerce.
I'm a tariff person. Mark has a more complex idea, but also very good.
The U.S. president offers the hint of a potential deal. Israel and Iran trade blows for a fourth day.
Weeks go by, no answer. That drags into a couple months.
Plus, buyer beware why this car may be a steal.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
The heads of some of the most powerful nations in the world are together at a Rocky Mountain resort in Canada-U.S, Alberta for 2 days of talks at the G7. They will be tackling pressing global issues like the escalating conflict in the Middle East and the pain of Donald Trump's tariffs. And that is how host Mark Carney began his day, meeting with a man at the center of the trade war. CTV's senior political correspondent Michael Couture now on what was said on day one and what was accomplished. Hi, Mike.
Well, Sandy, U.S. President Donald Trump says a deal with Canada is achievable soon. But just how the Prime Minister and the U.S. President will resolve this trade dispute remains unclear.
Our primary focus will be trade and trade with Canada, and I'm sure we can work something out. Yeah.
But it's unclear which path the two countries will agree on.
I've always been a tariff. It's simple, it's easy, it's precise, and it just goes very quickly. And I think Mark has a more complex idea, but also very good.
The meeting lasted for more than an hour and focused on trade negotiations and advancing the security relationship between the two countries.
The important thing is that we collectively think we're making progress and coming to a deal that would be in the economic interest of both countries. But we're not there yet, and that's why we reconvened after the meeting with the President and the Prime Minister, and we agreed to reconvene before the end of this week again.
While those bilateral negotiations continue, Prime Minister Mark Carney kicked off the G7 meeting, calling for unity at a time when he says the world is more divided and dangerous.
We're gathering at one of those turning points in history. I think we all recognize that turning point where the world looks to this table for leadership.
But it's already proving difficult, with Trump again suggesting Russia be included around this table. And he falsely claimed Justin Trudeau was prime minister in 2014 when Russia was booted from the G8, when in fact it was Stephen Harper.
The G7 used to be the G8. Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in, and I would say that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in.
The war in Ukraine will be part of that discussion on global peace and security, which is scheduled for this evening, as will the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Sandy?
Thanks, Mike. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelos. And Vashi, Mark Carney, as we saw in Mike's report, playing the diplomat publicly. But you have to wonder what the conversations are like without the cameras present. Any insight there?
Well, you read my mind, Sandy, because it's a question I've been asking as many people who are on the inside of those conversations over the last number of weeks as possible. And here's what I can relate to you and to everyone watching. I am told that the relationship between the two leaders is certainly, by contrast compared to Trump and Trudeau, much, much more productive. That's the exact language that was used with me, that they speak from time to time, that they exchange on occasion phone calls in that nature, and that ultimately it's the strength of that relationship that the people on the other side of the conversation, so other delegates, for example, from the Canadian side and the American side, they ultimately believe that is what gives them sort of this level of optimism we're now hearing about the potential for a deal. Now, I don't know exactly what they're saying in the language to each other, but certainly I think they're trading on the strength at this moment of that relationship.
Yeah, interesting. I was watching the interaction, the body language. Donald Trump calls the Prime Minister Mark, and he suggests that which does suggest that two men seem to be getting along well. We even have the U.S. president wearing a Canadian flag pin under the U.S. But, Vashi, the Prime Minister still has to walk a fine line with this unpredictable president. How's he going to do that with so many differing interests at play here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there are two things that I would point out. From a political perspective, it's a fine line as well. Remember, this is the person, the party that campaigned during the election on elbows up, not on getting along so well that we end up agreeing to something that includes a certain level of tariffs on our industries, right? So the political perspective in this is a fine line that Mark Carney, that the Prime Minister has to walk. But also from a policy perspective, if they are ultimately going to have to agree to some level of tariffs, which is what they all seem to be indicating publicly, what is that level? And truly, what can Canadians live with? I think that's the question they're going to have to wrestle with, Sandy.
All right, Vashi, thank you so much. Well, protesters with differing agendas are in Banff and Calgary again today, albeit in smaller numbers, but still hoping to send a message to G7 leaders, especially Donald Trump. CTV's Kathy Lee now on what they want the leaders to hear with Kananaskis closed to the public. Kathy.
Sandy, the G7 summit is an opportunity for anyone to come out and talk about any issues that are important to them, and that's what we're seeing and hearing. Small groups from different parts of the world have gathered in Banff, and more are expected to arrive throughout the day. One woman CTV News spoke to was the first to protest in the designated demonstration zone here. She isn't affiliated with a specific organization and was wearing a Stop Trump sign.
I don't understand why some of the leaders are here, because they're not acting on democratic principles in their own countries. I have a hard time with that.
And there was another man who shared his thoughts about President Donald Trump.
Just all the stuff going on in the States right now, and having Trump be allowed into Canada kind of bothers me.
There are also groups here who are protesting about the climate and environment issues, and another group is bringing awareness to human rights violations in their country.
We are Falun Gong group. As probably you know, we are persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party.
There are protests in Calgary today as well. A few dozen gathered at City Hall, including members of a Sikh group. They are angry about Prime Minister Mark Carney inviting the Indian Prime Minister to the G7 summit. This after RCMP linked the Indian government to the murder of a Canadian Sikh separatist activist in 2023. While the designated demonstration zones in Banff and Calgary are quite a ways from Kananaskis, the protests are being live streamed to the G7 leaders. Sandy.
CTV's Kathy Lee. Now, the cost of hosting this event is not cheap, as we've learned from previous gatherings of world leaders, and we'll find out from Ottawa by end of the fiscal year. But in the interim, we asked CTV's Rachel Aiello to break down the possible price tag for this high-level get-together.
Canada is playing host for the 7th time to the annual gathering of major economies. And this year's meeting in the mountains may be the most expensive Canadian G7 yet. If past is precedent from security to logistics, the summit could cost more than $500 million. The federal government did not respond to multiple questions about the budget for the big event. Hosting, known as the G7 presidency, rotates among member countries. The last time Canada hosted the G7 was in 2018 in Charlevoix, Quebec. That summit and related events were estimated to cost $600 million. That was twice the price of the G8 held in Kananaskis 2 decades ago. Experts say it's hard to put a price tag on top Canadian officials holding bilateral meetings in their own backyard.
Canada has to pick up the tab, but that's only 1/7 of the time that Canada gets a chance to influence the world when the other countries pay the bill.
Carney has selected a trio of big themes to tackle during the 3-day summit: protecting communities and the world, building energy security, and securing the partnerships of the future. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
And while world leaders are meeting in Alberta, Canada's eastern premiers, including Doug Ford of Ontario, are gathering in Boston, invited there by New England governors to talk energy, manufacturing, and tourism in the face of Trump's trade war. CTV's Sarah Plowman is in Boston now on how the discussions went, what the premiers came away with. Sarah.
Sandy, speaking with reporters afterward, Premier Doug Ford said that there's an urgent need for Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump to strike a deal to create certainty for people. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, who invited the Eastern Canadian premiers and Northeastern governors here, also said there was an urgency to this discussion to show Canadians that America is Canada's friend and ally. There's been a drop of Canadian tourism in all of these U.S. states.
I think across the board, we could all say that our tourism numbers, for example, are down anywhere between 20 and 60%.
New Brunswick's premier pointed out that a drop in tourism means people are losing their jobs, and she encouraged Americans to speak up.
That this tax has hurt the American economy and the American people, and we need Americans to pass that message up through, and hopefully we'll have two open ears that will hear it.
Premier Ford said that all the premiers and governors in this room are opposed to tariffs. He thinks that the governors have a big say and that they need to keep hammering home the point that we're stronger together. Nova Scotia's Premier Tim Houston noted, though, that there are a lot of things that are out of their control, but he thinks they need to focus on the things that they can control. Now, out of this meeting, expect another. Premier Ford says he'll be inviting the governors to Ontario to talk about energy and minerals, an invitation he plans to extend to all U.S. governors. Sandy.
CTV's Sarah Plowman in Boston. Well, as we heard, de-escalating the crisis between Israel and Iran is on the G7 agenda, with Donald Trump saying earlier today that Iran is not winning the war. The two Middle East countries have widened their targets in a new wave of attacks on a fourth day of fighting. Today, Iran hit Tel Aviv and Haifa, and Israel is warning residents of Tehran to leave that city. CTV's Adrian Gobriel on this and the travel advisories to Canadians in the region or those planning to head there. Adrian.
Sandy, no surprise, a blanket travel ban has been issued for Iran, Israel, the West Bank by Global Affairs Canada. Earlier today, Israel issued an evacuation order for certain neighborhoods in Tehran just before launching a fresh attack that in part hit that country's national news network while they were live on air. Have a look. News anchor Sahar Ramami is sent running as debris falls and smoke fills the set. These images provided by Iran's state broadcaster show the aftermath. The Israeli Defense Force confirming the attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran news network, claiming the building was being used by the Iranian armed forces under the guise of civilian activity. Across Israel, empty streets and the high-pitched blare of air raid sirens have blanketed the country for days now, warning of Iran's continued counterattacks. In the northern Israeli port city of Haifa, authorities there confirm an Iranian airstrike evaded the country's Iron Dome missile defense system, hitting a residential building.
It's pretty shocking to see our little neighborhood, peaceful and quiet, so devastated.
This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to rule out targeting Iran's supreme leader.
Look, we're doing what we need to do. I'm not going to get into the details. What we're doing is targeting regime sites, nuclear sites, military sites, and ballistic missile sites that are embedded in Tehran.
Israel says 24 people have been killed and more than 500 injured by Iran's missiles and drones. In Iran, the health authority there says at least 224 people have died since the fighting began late last week. We've been speaking with Canadians in Israel, desperate to get out. That airspace completely closed. Canadians with family in Iran say their loved ones are simply living moment to moment, hoping to make it through another night. Sandy.
CTV's Adrian Gobriel. Chilling details are emerging about the murder of a Minnesota politician and her husband and the attempted murder of another lawmaker. A 57-year-old man is facing charges after a tip led to his capture.
When Belter saw the officers get out of the car, he drew his weapon and began firing. He rushed into the house through the front door, firing into it.
Minutes later, Vance Bolter allegedly killed State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband. Authorities say on the same night, he then shot and injured another state lawmaker and his wife, and then went to the homes of two other elected officials, posing as a police officer intending to kill them. The alleged shooter also had the names of more than 45 elected officials in notes found in his car. Coming up, trapped in a massive scam.
A few weeks go by, no answer. That drags into a couple months.
How owning a dream car turned into a nightmare. All right, imagine going to a car dealership, buying a used car, and then learning it's a stolen vehicle. Some owners have come forward to CTV's W5 saying they are now without a car but on the hook for the payments. The scam is the subject of a W5 investigation, and correspondent John Woodward is here now. So, John, how does something like this happen?
Sandy, it's called revinning, and it's a process whereby thieves can take a stolen car, make it look legitimate, and then turn around and sell it to an unsuspecting buyer. So we talked to one man who bought what he thought was a regular car from a car dealership. Turned out that dream car turned into a nightmare.
Frank's family member made an insurance claim with TD Insurance, but that's where things got strange.
A few weeks go by, no answer. That drags into a couple months, and then finally TD rejects the claim altogether.
In a letter, TD Insurance told them it had found a problem with the vehicle identification number, or VIN, a number that is supposed to uniquely identify the car, saying, "Our investigation has concluded that the VIN is fictitious and registered to another vehicle. Therefore, there will be no coverage for this loss."
What did that mean, fictitious VIN?
Exactly what I thought when I heard that.
Okay, the fake VIN, then the real car, which you managed to track down. How did that come about?
Well, we did what a lot of buyers can do. You look at the records for the car, you find inconsistencies. In this case, it was color and mileage. And then we followed the trail all the way out to Alberta. The real car was all the way across the country. And so that's something that experts say buyers aren't doing enough, but also government agencies aren't doing it enough. And that's opening up a situation where you have revinning fraud on the rise. Some people saying there are more than 100,000 possibly disguised stolen cars on the road right now.
Okay, John, so we have to be smart about this as consumers. Thanks so much. CTV National News. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Incentives to explore Canada's museums and parks are coming our way, courtesy the federal government, which is hoping to capitalize on the fact that many travelers consider the U.S. a no-go zone. CTV's Abigail Beeman on the Canada Strong Pass and the thinking behind it. Abigail.
Sandy, there's a long list of Canadian attractions to save on starting this Friday until September 2nd, including free admission for everyone at national parks and at national museums like the Canadian Museum of Nature here in Ottawa. Free admission if you're 17 and under, half off if you're 18 to 24.
At the Canadian Museum of Nature, Akal likes the dinosaurs.
They look realistic.
His mom likes getting her kids engaged away from screens. She also loves the idea of free admission all summer through the Canada Strong Pass against the backdrop of a trade war with the United States.
Plenty of trip to the East Coast as well, so I'm glad about this pass. I don't have to pay for my kids' museum entries, but no, absolutely, it's impacted us, and we want to keep our money here.
We've seen Canadians across this great country come together in an incredible show of unity and pride.
The Canada Strong Pass includes free admission to national parks and a 25% discount on camping fees. And for those 17 and under, admission to national museums and travel on Via Rail is completely free, while it's half off for those 18 to 24. The pass was a Liberal campaign promise when a focus on vacations within our borders was already at the forefront, and that hasn't changed. Last month, the number of Canadians who returned from the U.S. by car was down nearly 40% from May the year before. By air, return trips from the U.S. were down 24%. Interestingly, there was a nearly 10% increase for Canadians returning from overseas.
We've just opened our new exhibition.
The Museum of Nature hopes the pass will encourage even more tourists from other provinces.
People don't realize this is Canada's National Natural Heritage and History Museum. It's open to anybody to come, but a lot of folks don't get to come to see it. And while the government called it the Canada Strong Pass, there's actually no pass at all. You can just show up, or in some cases, like overnight camping, make a reservation. Sandy?
Good to know, Abigail. Thanks. Well, we now know the names of the first 6 players on Canada's men's Olympic hockey team for next year's games in Italy. No surprise, superstar Connor McDavid is on the list and will be making his Olympic debut. 2-time gold medalist Sidney Crosby will also be on the roster, along with 4 others from Canada's Four Nations team. They are Sam Reinhart, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, and Braden Point. And this will be the first time in 12 years NHL players will compete in the Olympics. We'll be back in a moment. Students at Banff Elementary School are buzzing with excitement, working in collaboration with the town's poet laureate. They found a unique way to contribute to the G7 summit. CTV's chief news anchor Omar Satudina shares more on the joint effort and the group's goal.
We want our day in the sun, our time to shine.
In a world where the grown-ups make the most important decisions, the students at Banff Elementary School are not letting their ages get in the way of being heard.
Do you think adults make the world complicated sometimes?
Yes. Very.
What would you tell them?
To stop focusing on their greed and start hearing the stuff that we need.
They come from families that represent 52 different countries, and going to school surrounded by such spectacular natural beauty gives them a unique focus on the challenges impacting them not only locally.
We want a cleaner air, we want less climate change, and we want less forest fires.
But also globally.
I think bigger countries should kind of donate to smaller countries or send food and money to help them out.
So when a community outreach team from the G7 summit got in touch with the school to get them involved, the school knew it would be a great fit. They came up with the idea of writing a song and brought on Banff's poet laureate, Heather Jean Jordan, who talked with them about the big themes.
I had taken all the words that came again and again and put them on a board. And so then all the students came up with rhymes and lines that could be in the song.
Together, they brainstormed the lyrics, composed the music, and turned it into this, a song called A Single Seed. The seed for the idea itself was planted a few weeks before Easter, and staff and students knew they had to work quickly, straight to work as soon as the kids got back.
We came back from break on the Monday. It started on the Monday. They had it written by the Wednesday. They learned it on the Thursday. We practiced it on the Friday. We recorded it on the Monday.
The song and this recording, what they are now calling their anthem to the world.
Our students have this opportunity to see in real life the kinds of impact that some of these decisions that are being made at the global level, how they impact locally here in Banff.
Their reminder to the leaders of the richest countries that what they do or don't do is a benefit or a burden their generation will ultimately carry.
And Omar will be reporting from Banff tonight at 11 with CTV National News. I'm Sandra Rinaldo. That's it for us today. We'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Bye for now.